Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's video. My name is Angel DeSantis. This is a new set. I had my sisters in town last week. I had 2 out of 7 here, and they helped me design this beautiful little set back here. It'll change as we go, but I really love it, and it makes it easy for me to sit and film because I want to do more of this. So the pink wall is over here. If you've been with me for a little bit, you know I have the pink wall. The pink wall is on that side. And now the computer is here. But in this video, I wanted to address the questions, 2 questions that had kind of a similar vein. One was by conversion and confusion. It said, how do you deal with a spouse if you've married as per God's plan and the person is not sound? And the other question by Dave Zach says, how do you coexist with family members who are still in and strong believers? So I wanted to cover that. And I would also like to remind you that I am only speaking from my experience. I cannot speak to your experience, but the reason I am so transparent and try and articulate my experience is because I know there are similarities. But that being said, the things that worked for me and the things that I went through will be different from the things that work for you, and what you're going through is different. However, your lived experience is valid, and that should be acknowledged. So if you are going through something and it feels difficult, acknowledge that. Don't compare it to, well, this person has it easier, so I'm not going to take their advice. Or, well, this person has it harder that way, so I shouldn't be complaining. No, there's just you. There's what you're going through. That's your life experience, and that's what matters. Give yourself permission to believe your own experience, and give yourself permission to cultivate tools that work for you. And then maybe later you can offer them out. But I can only offer what has worked for me because I have cultivated what has worked for me. And maybe it works for you. Maybe there's something that you can take a percentage of. But your lived experience matters. And I cannot speak to your lived experience, but I will share mine with you. And I hope that it helps. So how do you deal with a spouse or a family member who is still a part of the cult or the religion or whatever it is? And I do have a couple of videos on this topic, and I will link them below. But I do know, first of all, and I want to acknowledge that it is incredibly difficult. And for me, the reason it was difficult is because I went from being one of us to being one of them. And as you know, if you were raised in a cult or a religion, an abusive cult or an abusive religion, BT dubs, all cults are abusive. Anyways, I digress. The reason that that's painful is because there is an us and then there is a them. And the them is usually people that we are taught to hate. So in my cult, Children of God, it was like we were the Lord's end time army. Everyone else was a systemite, and systemites were disgusting. Systemites couldn't feel love or joy. They were always trying to hurt you. They were the bad guys. They were disgusting. They lived lesser lives. And so they taught us to dehumanize them. And if you grew up in a religion, it's the same thing. It's like the saved Christians and then everyone else that belongs in the gutter and needs to be saved. And so you're coming from a place of just incredible superiority and insecurity at the same time. Because then if you see someone out there that you admire, immediately there's a war within you of, why do I admire this person? They're a disgusting person, but I think they're better than me, but I'm the best. And it's a whole other thing. But anyways, the most painful thing for me in the transition was going from being one of us, being one of God's family, and being one with my family, to now knowing and understanding that all my friends and all my family all of a sudden think that I'm disgusting. I'm one of them, and I'm one of those people that need to be saved, except they can't save me because I knew the truth, and now, according to them, I'm leaving and I'm turning my back on the truth, and I'm turning my back on God, which makes me doubly disgusting had I never known the truth, right? So it's like if you're an outsider and you haven't known the truth, then there's the, oh my God, poor you, let me save you. But if you've known the truth and then you turn your back, then there's that verse like God will spit you out of his mouth, which, why is God putting things in his mouth he doesn't like? I'm just saying. Anyways, so I felt very shunned and very ashamed. And I left with my husband at the time, and we kind of lived alone. I would have some communication with my family, and what I noticed is that they started lying to me right away. because I immediately was no longer worth telling the truth to, because why would they tell me the truth? Because clearly I had turned my back on the truth. And that was very, very difficult. And dealing with people who all of a sudden, one day to the next, had a sudden huge leg up on me. They had their sudden superiority complex over me. And I was struggling to like pay rent and pay bills and, you know, be in a relationship. And I was having to lie to a lot of people because like you can't get a job by being like, hey, guess what? Just left an abusive cult, would like a job, BT dubs, I have no education. So I was struggling a lot, and they really enjoyed seeing me struggle because they felt I deserved to suffer because I had turned my back on God. So it felt very dehumanizing, and being dehumanized by somebody who claims to love you is dehumanizing. It invalidates what you're living through, and it can feel like it completely invalidates your human experience, and it can make you feel like you're doing life wrong. And so from that state of being constantly made to feel like you're doing life wrong, it is a very difficult and sometimes impossible thing to have a relationship with the person who is making you feel that way. And this is where we get into what have you internalized and what are you used to putting up with? Because that's the question. And in trying to have a relationship with people who are still part of the cult or still part of the religion, what are you used to putting up with? And for me, I was used to abuse. I was used to being looked down on because I was a woman. I was used to being told that I was stupid all the time. And so when they continued to do this, I thought that it was my fault that the relationship was strained because I was the one that had stepped out. I was the one who was no longer serving God. So I thought that I had to tolerate all of this abuse. And I thought I had to tolerate all the underhanded comments or overhanded comments or all the passive aggression or just aggression of the like, don't you feel stupid for leaving? And like, when are you going to come back? And like, aren't you ashamed of yourself? And you're probably going to end up in porn, and all those comments. And I put up with it because I was used to it. And if you're in that situation where you're trying to have a relationship with family members or spouses who are still treating you as other and who are treating you as if they are somehow better than you and they still have that superiority mindset, the question simply becomes, what are you willing to put up with? And so understanding how you were raised and what you were raised to put up with or what you were raised to accept is really useful in trying to move the relationship forward. Because what were you trained to accept? And is it borderline abuse or is it just abuse? And moving forward, do you have the courage to demand respect for yourself? Because I didn't. I really didn't. And all of the relationships that I had with people with these superiority complexes, they only survived as long as I wasn't asking to be humanized to them. And the moment I started saying, actually, you should respect my opinion, or actually, I've thought about it, this is the premise of my argument, here's my argument, what do you have to say? And when I started doing things like that and started demanding respect, and again, it's not demanding respect of you should respect me because I'm your spouse, or you should respect me because of this or that. It's simply I've done my research, I've thought about it, this is my argument, what do you think? And then they are forced to actually deal with the argument. And then that's when you find out that most religious or abusive tactics base their arguments off of the ability to attack you as a person, not the argument. So they attack, I think it's called ad hominem, where you attack the person making the argument instead of the argument itself. And that's a whole other thing. But basically, if you're demanding respect for yourself and you say, these are my reasons, I've thought about it, I have lived experience, this is what I think, and this is my reason for thinking it. And then they tell you, well, you're ugly. It completely dismisses everything that you've done. It dismisses the argument. It dismisses all of the internal turmoil and everything that you've done to present this lovely thing, this thought or this decision or this rationale that you came up with your life. They completely disrespect it. And when you start seeing that, the question becomes, do you want the people in your life to respect you or not? Which leads me back to the first question of what are you willing to put up with? And for me, because I was trained to put up with people who abused me, I kept those people in my life until I realized that I am capable of rational thought and I deserve respect. And when I started thinking that and observing, do these people treat me with respect? And they just fully didn't. Then the question became, do I want to be surrounded by people in my life who don't respect me? And once that was the question, the answer became very obvious. But it is a very complicated thing, and especially when it comes to spouses and family members. I will say, though, that the most abusive dynamics that I've ever seen anywhere ever have been in families, because they are the ones that can really sink hooks in with obligation. And this is not even just religious families. This can be like traditional families. I grew up in Asia, so the Asian family, just like the unit, there's such a hierarchy of assumed respect, and the consequence for not playing along with the hierarchy that they've set up can be really vicious. And yeah, so some of the most abusive dynamics I've ever seen have been in families. And I think we hear a lot of like, you should respect your father and mother, especially if you're religious, you've heard that growing up. You should respect your father and mother. Family is most important, blah, blah, blah. All of that is true if the premise is that your family loves you and your family has respect for you. If your family does not love and respect you, you shouldn't be honoring them and respecting them and trying to maintain a relationship with them in your life. And I've seen quite a few people that I know who grew up the way I did and then left. And then they get into relationships with people who have loving families. And in this loving family, they tell the person who was raised like I was that like, oh, you should reconnect with your family because family is really important. And then this person feels guilty and tries to reconnect, and it turns very badly because the loving family can only see family through their lens. And they think, well, when we have a disagreement, we sort it out. And what they don't understand is the disagreement that I have with my family, or the disagreement that I have with my friends or whoever that are still part of the cult, is not a disagreement. It's the fact that I'm not even human to them. And that's a completely different issue than a family disagreement, right? So like, if there's a brother and sister squabble in a loving family, that can be resolved. In my situation, in dealing with religious fanatics who have abused me my whole life, they don't even think I'm a human being. That can't be resolved. So it's important for you to understand what dynamic it is that you're dealing with, and is the issue of you needing respect in your life something that you can live without, or is it something that you can resolve? Because if you have had the courage to take yourself out of the situation and create a life for yourself, and create a whole new framework, or you're trying to create a framework of thought for yourself, there is rationale to that. You're not just doing it for fun. This is the least fun that you can have in your life. But it makes sense to you, and you are trying to build yourself a world that makes sense. And if you come to this person and offer the rationale behind that, and they cannot respect the way that you think, then there are some hard decisions to make. And that is how, honestly, that is how my marriage ended up dissolving, because I would state what I was going through and my reasoning behind it. And I was made to feel that I had no capability for rational thought. Therefore, everything that I brought to the table was irrelevant. And I had to decide, can I live the rest of my life with this person who doesn't respect me? And hell no was the answer. So I left. But in a lot of these relationships, when you come from something so abusive, sometimes you do reach a crossroads where your only option is, can I maintain the relationship because I was taught to live life as a lesser person, or do I have to dissolve the relationship? And these are really tough questions, and I am sorry that I don't have answers. I only have questions. But the reason for that is that you have the answer. You have the answer because it's your life. You have 100% of the context surrounding it. And again, if you have done the work of committing to yourself and walking yourself out of something that is abusive, that is set up to dehumanize and attack you, and you are now at this crossroads where you are trying to maintain a relationship with people who are also willing to dehumanize you or willing to make you feel like less. Are you willing to be in this relationship for the rest of your life? And if not, what in the relationship has to change? And sometimes it's a matter of you having the courage to demand respect or ask for respect and say, look, this is just what I'm going through and it's really difficult for me, but this is what I need from you right now. And sometimes that goes well. And sometimes the other party in the relationship is incapable of viewing you as a rational human being that deserves respect. And so I think your job is to figure out, how is the relationship? What is it based off of? And is the premise so flawed that you can no longer continue the relationship? Or is there a mutual respect there? And there is something that you just need the courage to ask for, or you just need the courage to share of like, hey, this is really difficult. I would like to remain married to you, or I would like to continue this sibling relationship or this parental relationship. But I feel a lack here, and this is what I need from you. Do you have the courage to ask for that? And do you also have the courage to receive the answer? Because sometimes, and this has happened to me, where I have had the courage to ask, just like, this is what I would like from you. I'm in pain, and this is what I'm going through, and can you help me with this? And their answer has been no, but more rude. And that's incredibly painful to go through, but on the other side of that is the understanding that it is always better to have the courage to ask the question. Always. Because then you get a truthful answer. When you have the courage to ask a truthful question, you get a truthful answer, and the truth is always worth knowing. So, can you find out in your life, in this relationship that you have in mind, can you find out what you are willing to put up with? And does it come from a abuse base, right? So in my case, I was used to abuse, so I put up with a lot more than I should have. And me, quote, demanding more was me demanding basic human respect. So what are you built to put up with? What is the relationship? Do they view you as a human being, or is this something that is kind of incapable on healing from your end, right? Because I can think I'm human all I want, but anytime I get into a discussion or anything like that with someone who doesn't view me as human, I'm going to lose. And it's not because of me. It's because of the way this other person's worldview is set up to see me. So what is that relationship? And then finally, do you have the courage to ask for what you need, understanding that the answer might be no? And these are all really sort of very big life decisions. But I would also like to say that I have come through a lot of relationships, and dynamics change, things change, but I have never once regretted staking up for myself and asking for what I needed. Not once. And in the moment, it is so painful, but on the other side of it, you will never regret asking for basic human respect. You deserve respect. You deserve to feel safe. And when I say demand respect, I mean that you need to demand it for yourself. Like, I think I deserve to be treated well. But that doesn't mean I go to you and tell you, like, you have to, like, here's a list of ways that you need to treat me. What that means for myself is I know what I need, and I know that I demand that for myself. So when I interact with you, I observe how you treat me. And then I observe if you are capable of understanding how I want to be treated. And if I observe that you're treating me a little bit badly, but I think that maybe there's just a little bit of miscommunication, then I can go to you and be like, hey, I feel a little bit disrespected. Here's why. Here's where I'm coming from. What do you think? And if you respond in kind, then we can grow the relationship. But if I come to you and say, hey, I feel disrespected, and the response is, well, it's because you're stupid, then I immediately say, okay, maybe it's because I'm stupid. And then I'll go. because I don't want to be in this relationship. I don't want that relationship to go any further, because I cannot demand relationship from a relationship like that, where the other person doesn't even view you, your existence as valid. It is impossible to demand respect. Impossible. So understand the relationship dynamic. Understand what you have the courage to ask for. And then just, if there was one thing that I could send out to everybody, if there was one thing that I could give people, it would be courage. Because if you have the courage, you're fine. If you have the courage to try again, if you have the courage to state your needs, state your wants, if you have the courage to hear no, the courage to hear yes, everything falls into place. So give yourself permission to ask those difficult questions, cultivate as much courage as possible, and then demand respect for yourself, because it is so important that you understand that your lived experience is valid. Your life experience is important. You deserve respect from the people in your life, especially the closer the relationship, the more they should respect you. So understand that. Have that be the premise for your relationship with yourself, and have that be the premise for the relationships around you. And you might need to go through a shedding of the skin. I definitely did, or definitely have a couple of times. But the relationships that are in my life now are so nurturing and so wonderful, and I feel so held in love, which gives me the ability to do this, to come here, share, and talk, and to be a little bit bolder, because I know that if something happens in my life, I can reach out to the people around me and I'm met with love and respect, not the "I told you so. You shouldn't have done that. You stepped out of line. We knew this was coming." Those relationships don't belong in your life. And if you think, maybe they do because blah, 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 then great. Then we might have just found out that there is a certain part of you that expects to be treated badly and thinks you need to tolerate it. So I know this is a lot. I know that it's fairly complicated. And if you have questions, ask me below. And I will link the other videos. And you can also go through the religious trauma course. I'm getting better at remembering all the things. But I hope that this was helpful. And if anything resonates with you, or if you have any questions, please ask. I really do enjoy interacting with y'all, and I will do it more. So as always, thank you for being here. Go get your courage, and I'll see you next time.